Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. Welcome to the Change Management Simplified podcast, where we will explain and discuss what change management is really about, using real examples alongside principles of change management based on our experiences on projects, transformations, change initiatives, and of course, the home experiences as well. The question we have in front of us is actually this was triggered by one of the listeners by the initials of LTT on Spotify on 4th of February, where they wanted me to discuss the psychology of change management. And as you're aware, I did mention in the very first episode that change management is very much connected to psychology. So we will touch upon psychological topics in subject areas, but we don't claim to be psychologists. However, as I do my role, I have grown to understand and realize and accept that psychology is key to this topic, to any activities that I plan with the individuals, but also when I'm talking and interacting with them, I have to be mindful psychologically how the change will have an impact on the individuals or stakeholders. So, what is the question at hand today? As a leader, how do you apply emotional intelligence to change management? Firstly, what is change management? Not change management. What is emotional intelligence? We just covered what is change management in the previous 3 episodes. Today we're going to focus the topic around emotional intelligence and how it works with change management. Well, firstly, this terminology of emotional intelligence. This is a topic that's been around for some years, a concept that's been still growing and developing in nature, but it was first introduced by Abraham Maslow in around 1950s as emotional strength. However, it has now evolved over time, and it was made cool and essential by a psychologist called Daniel Goleman in around 1995, where he published a book entitled Emotional Intelligence: Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. Now, this actually makes you question the traditional way of thinking of that you can only be successful if you've got a high IQ. This is where change management comes into play by applying emotional intelligence. He then made it even much more cooler by writing an article in the Harvard Business Review titled, actually, What Makes a Leader? And his focus was around emotional intelligence. Several other psychologists have continued to work on this topic, but I'm not going to go through all the names, but really that's the history around how this topic has evolved. And now it's even much more important because we have many more human beings, more people, more bigger corporates than we had in the 1950s or even in the 1990s. And we have, as human beings, or as the world has evolved, there's a lot more change happening and more frequently. And therefore, change management with emotional intelligence is essential that we would like to make successful. So, how do you adopt change management effectively as a leader? For example, as a sponsor, as a transformation lead, a program lead, a CEO, or a chief operating officer, anyone in the lead, a chief actuary, even presidents. We know quite a few, no naming names, but Donald Trump in some cases. Yes, emotional intelligence is sometimes not, I don't know what to say. He's a classic case for emotional intelligence. But how do you adopt it to enable you to become a successful leader? And the only way you can do that, you can't do change management in isolation. You have to do it with emotional intelligence. And I'm going to try through this episode answer that question, and hopefully when we get to the end, you will be much more confident in this topic, but also understand why emotional intelligence plays a key part when you are going through a change initiative and therefore need to incorporate it in your change management style. So as we say, regardless of whether you are an experienced leader or even when you have a change practitioner, for example, myself, to provide you the change management strategies and tools and activities, without you applying emotional intelligence as a person or as a human being driving a change, all your hard work will go down the drain, because the change you are making or implementing is impacting people. You need to take a step back and understand the people emotional side effects of the change, how the people will react, how the stakeholders will react to this change, Similar to the example we used in the previous episode, when the child was going to school, what did you do to try and help them make the transition easier? The four components that make up emotional intelligence, and you have to break them down into those four components. We will go into each one of them in a bit more detail in the following episode. I promise to dedicate an episode for each one of them to make sure that I give sufficient examples, but also to give you an opportunity in more content and insight. The first component is self-aware. This is all about you having the ability to be aware of your emotional strength and weaknesses, and how these impact those around you. How do you react when you're told no, you can't do what you want to do? That's something you have to. It's something that you have to reflect on yourself before you actually expose it to everyone else. So if you don't have self-awareness, this could be a little bit difficult, because some people might start to be scared to approach you. The second component is self-management, and this is really about how do you deal and handle your emotions in intense phases, for example, in a project. Do you have outrageous emotional outbursts, with the project team if an issue is raised? Do you start to blame others? For example, the project team for not telling you beforehand. However, if this is the case, then you need to step back and reflect that maybe people are not comfortable, or they don't find you approachable to tell you when things are going wrong because of the way you react, and maybe they don't feel safe around you. So you need to think about that. For example, a classic example here that you will all know, and New York Times has also written about this. Recently, when I say recently, I'm thinking about 2022 or 2023, when Elon Musk bought Twitter. It was reported in New York Times that he was firing those who criticized him. Is that really the best approach to go about a change initiative? And he was actually taking on a big transformation. But do you fire someone who's criticizing? And this could be good criticism, because I personally take feedback or bad criticism as good feedback. So I step back and reflect, and to see how I can do it better. But of course, Elon Musk, very rich, is very wealthy, he's got a lot of money, he would just fire you. But is that the best way? Because at the end of the day, you will end up losing very good skill sets within the company, or with all those working on the project. And you don't want to, end up in such a position. And, in the corridors, there's chit chat in the corridors will go around very quickly, and you will struggle to replace individuals if you can't, manage yourself, your emotions. And this is where working in change management, it's not easy, because in situations where I do come across it, and I will come across it because this is why I end up working on projects or being assigned as a change practitioner, is usually because of the emotional side of the change, either both from the stakeholders impacted or the leaders who are actually leading it. Because most leaders are very well known for having that confident, boisterous, and very driven attitude or skill set, which is great. However, sometimes it can be your downfall in some cases if you cannot get the balance right with how you manage others and how you react and how you lead.
Now, if you find this podcast beneficial and interesting to listen to, do me a favor. Please press follow and subscribe and share with your friends and families.
The third component is social awareness. And this is the ability to be aware of the emotions of those around you. Basically, think before you speak. A classic example here, I'll call them business cases. Again, and this is another, again, someone who's been in a powerful position. Classic one, Boris Johnson. He was previously the London mayor. And then after that, he became prime minister for a short time. But however, in these leadership roles that he was in, he created a lot of noise with whichever stakeholder he worked with or spoke to. Boris Johnson was going to say something in the wrong way. And he just kind of just said what actually came to mind. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. And somehow he managed to speak to, I'll say maybe 50% of the population in the UK that actually really loved him. Because he said what they actually wanted to, they wanted to say, but didn't have a voice. But then there was the other, I would say maybe 50%, that felt he didn't need to say out loudly what people would like to say. So he's always been that character that divides everyone. However, now he's a challenging stakeholder to work with. Saying that, he actually did improve and didn't speak as much as he used to when he was a mayor. When he became a prime minister, I'm sure he had a change practitioner lead who told him, don't unnecessarily feel the need to speak. Do not respond to questions if you don't need to. Try and keep your opinions, your self-opinions to yourself, because this role is not about you and how you feel, but it's about the country, the people, and everything else that comes with it. Also, think before you react, it's about being aware of how others feel, be sensitive, be compassionate to the stakeholder needs, and the delivery of the message is important. Read the room. Don't say the wrong thing at the wrong time. If you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, which Boris Johnson did very often, you lose confidence in you. Hence, he wasn't in his prime minister position for very long. But also, you lose credibility in something that you could have done very well. And we all saw and knew Boris Johnson to have wanted to be the prime minister for such a long time, and he worked towards that, and he loved doing the job. However, his social skill sets, but his message, the delivery of his messaging, and yes, the decisions he made didn't really help the situation. So unfortunately, his career path as a prime minister ended very early. In addition to this, also, when your team feels like you're disrespecting them, they feel like you don't treat them very well, you don't think much of them, you undervalue them. This drives a toxic uncreative and non-collaborative environment. So you have to be mindful. As a leader, you would want to create an environment that drives and motivates people to be creative, come up with even better ideas that you have to help you execute your strategy. But also you want to drive that collaboration, teamwork, to make everything work better, but also for people to share ideas and share knowledge, because this all, after all, benefits you as a leader. You become successful in whatever project that you're working on, but also helps the company's growth because it's retaining and motivating these excellent skill sets around them and giving them the opportunity to do so without them fearing the implications of them coming up with an idea that might not work. However, they might have come up with three other ideas which could have worked. So you need to be mindful of that.
Now, if you find this podcast beneficial and interesting to listen to, do me a favor. Please press follow and subscribe and share with your friends and families.
The fourth component is relationship management. And this is really the ability to apply appropriate stakeholder management. Stakeholder, you hear that phrase again. And to be able to leverage this to influence and gain ongoing support from the impacted stakeholders. Ongoing support is needed. If you lose ongoing support, it will become a mountain to climb for you to get to the end of the change project and to get the success at the end of it. It also enables you to resolve conflict and issue resolution. It makes it easier. So if you're unable to create long-lasting relationship or relationships that allow your project team around you or your team around you to be able to discuss with you or to exchange ideas with you, it makes it difficult as a leader because you won't know what they're thinking. You want to know what your project team or your stakeholders around you are thinking so that you can react to those thoughts, but also try and stay a step ahead of them. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be reactive to the situation or when something is going wrong. You want to be a step ahead, be prepared. And this is where the change management aspect comes into play with emotional intelligence by those four components. Now, to summarize, the first component of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. This will get you ongoing support by impacted stakeholders because they don't really see, you contain your emotions, but also if you're in a meeting and someone says this is really not going the way that it's going and you handle yourself well, you will get that ongoing support. They will look and say, okay, they're human too. And they're trying, the explanation gives me confidence that they know there's an issue, but they're willing and open to work on it. I can work with this leader. The other second piece is self-management. Self-management, again, due to your actions and how you react to scenarios, will also encourage your team, your stakeholders to collaborate with you. But also your team, your core team, which is the project team in this case, plus the impacted stakeholders will start to collaborate with each other. But if you constantly have outbursts, no one really wants to work with, a stakeholder who can't contain their emotions. Actually, sometimes it comes across as immature. So it's important that you check yourself and make sure you can manage your emotions. Thirdly, social awareness. Social awareness will drive better working environment, as I mentioned above. So it's important that you create that environment. And then number 4 is relationship management. This reduces the chances of change resistance. Change resistance is going to be the nail in the coffin if you do not manage your stakeholders appropriately. By applying emotional intelligence, you need to stop thinking you are at the top, you make the decisions, and therefore everyone has to follow what you have to do. If that's your thinking process, then you've got a long way to be a successful leader. Because the higher you go, the more your soft skills come to play. You don't need to be an expert in everything. Let's use Elon Musk. Don't know if I can use Elon Musk. However, in this case, he's got successful businesses, but he doesn't, probably not the best one. He's got successful businesses, but he's hired very skilled technical people to help him do what he needs to do. He does have some emotional intelligence. Sometimes he just says things at the wrong time. However, I do believe he is a very clever strategic businessman, because he wouldn't be where he is if he didn't have some sort of emotional intelligence. And maybe those close to him who actually work with him and come up with these creative ideas of the technologies, all these cars that he's making, there's got to be something about him that we don't see in public. But when maybe he's with those core developers, he's a different person. He gives them the space to create things, which will make him successful. And in the, that's change management with emotional intelligence. For next week's episode that will be released on Saturday night, we will continue with the topic of emotional intelligence, but focusing on self-awareness, using real examples that I've come across on projects, but also what I've actually gone through in life. We will cover how and when it goes wrong, but also how you can develop emotional intelligence to help you become a better leader. Thank you for listening, and see you then.
If you find this podcast beneficial or interesting, please press follow, like, or subscribe. Lastly, and of course, don't forget to spread the word by sharing. Thank you for listening.